I greet my viewers with another liberal message from such a progressive political commentator like me. Actually, if you are interested in receiving a liberal take of international events, international politics in USA, domestic politics in USA or domestic politics in Russia, you are my welcome guest. Definitely will increase your knowledge considerably. Of international politics. All due respects, to intricacies of international and domestic politics. You can send your feedbacks to my email address. It's armenak.nuridjanian64@gmail.com or armenak.nuridjanian64@gmail.com. Now, well, actually, I want to cover certain actually outrageous politics of Russian censors, that try to spy on Telegram messaging service users, altogether, as a whole. You see, the Telegram is an international message service that uses encryption for its users, and Russian government can actually use a legal approach to getting prints, contents of those messages, for certain users, as was actually ordered by a Russian court. If Russian court orders them, Telegram, to release, messages, messages of certain users that are suspected in terrorist or criminal activities, espionage or other crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors, then, of course, the messenger service, Telegram should comply with the court order. But when the Russian secret police, FSB, or Federal Security Service, demands all encryption keys from all those users of that messenger service, Telegram, which amount to a great number of people, it's outrageous, it's illegal, because then FSB, Russian Secret Service, will have access, will spy on millions of users without any court warrants, without any court orders. That's why I'm talking about lawlessness in Russia. And this outrage, this has been spotted and protected by former KGB repressive President Putin, who only clings to power as his actually repressive regime, keeps sending Russian journalists and bloggers to prison, to FSB prison in Leforto for only the extremist, so-called extremist blogs, or maybe critical article that criticized Russian government as was deemed illegal by the Russian information law, which been adopted by Russian Duma parliament in 1993. Now, actually, with situation with human rights and freedom of speech, freedom of travel, freedom of obtaining education, is is seriously violated in Russia by Russian repressive legislation, repressive laws, that restrict freedom of travel, restrict freedom of speech, restrict freedom of citizens getting education. Well, actually, I believe that Western countries like USA and Western Europe and the whole Western world, including Canada and Australia and New Zealand, should actually be united in fight for human rights in Russia. Should actually help Russian people, to overthrow that repressive regime under Russian President Putin. As as actually Russian President Putin resort to assassination when it comes to defectors, high-level defectors, like presidential advisors, Russian president advisors, who fled to USA and was found, with a broken neck or something, or other, serious injuries, dead in a Washington hotel. This is an outrageous situation, and I believe that in the same like cases of Skripal and case of using Russian using a chemical weapon, Novichok, in Great Britain, is outrageous too, as well as poisoning of FSB defector Alexander Litvinenko, who actually was double agent, and I believe who was poisoned by Kremlin emissaries Kovtun and Yuri Lugavoy, who later became a Russian parliamentarian from Liberal Democratic Party. Well, Russia denies any extradition. It refuses to sign any treaty to extradite suspects, criminal suspects to another country, which is outrageous, of course, as even Russian, because it might be necessary to extradite drug lords, like Russian consular service in Argentina was actually caught red-handed trafficking a large party of, large load of narcotics, of cocaine, to Russia from Argentina, and then non-extradition actually makes it difficult for Western justices to punish Russian drug lords, for instance, murderers, robbers, that kind of people, hackers. And also there is a situation when Russia resorted to hacking Democratic Party accounts and making public at Julian Assange website, WikiLeaks, and then Russia was involved as well in interfered in elections, in last elections 2016, and supplied lots of fake stories in order to blemish the reputation of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton, as Russian politicians imagined themselves conservatives, and then they supported Trump, Republican candidate Trump, as he most vicious and one that can hurt American people the most. Well, probably that's why they supported him. As President Trump, cut taxes for the wealthy, and cut taxes for corporations 15%, for wealthy 2.6%, and cut social spending for $1.6 trillion, and was actually recommended himself like worst enemies of working poor, working class Americans, and a friend of the wealthy. He actually issued a transgender ban on service in the U.S. military, which was later repudiated by federal courts, and then he actually stopped the DACA program to provide temporary asylum for and a pathway to citizenship for young adults, immigrants who were actually brought to United States by their parents as young children, and therefore they didn't break U.S. immigration laws, I believe. And it was law broken by their parents, but not by young children who simply followed their parents. I didn't have any other choice. Yeah. And then also in terms of imposing sanctions, I approve sanctions against Russia because they will help punish Russian oligarchs, for instance, for their supporting Putin regime, and If the United States, of course, frees assets of Russian oligarchs, like Boris Deripaska's assets in American banks, American stock, bonds, derivatives, and these are, real estate property in the United States. In other words, everything he owns in the United States will make a considerable contribution to U.S. Treasury, and the rest of the Russian oligarchs as well. And Britain should do the same to freeze the assets of Russian oligarchs in London and confiscate those funds, because those were stolen funds, and those oligarchs simply robbed the Russian treasury. Those were former Soviet Communist Party leaders and directors of Russian enterprises, Soviet enterprises, government-owned enterprises. Even now, government-owned enterprises amount to 70% of all Russian enterprises. And if Russian responds to counteractions, like we're gonna ban export of titanium into the United States, which will violate probably mostly interests of a Boeing airplane builder. But then thousands of Russian workers will be actually out of work, and Russian business won't have any profit if they won't be able to export so much titanium to Boeing Corporation. For instance, therefore was measures of Cold War very counterproductive, in my opinion, and will simply hurt interests of Russian workers who will lose their jobs, and Russian business who won't have any profit, related to the exports of their production to the Western world. And then, in the second, Russia has some vulnerabilities, as it is a country without convertible currency. Russian ruble is inconvertible, and actually weak economy, with actually 6% of American GDP. Only then that situation actually U.S. President Trump, I believe, may go even further and ask his Saudi Arabian friends, like Saudi King Abdullah, to increase oil production considerably, so that will collapse oil prices, and for a short period of time at least. That would actually reduce Russian, profits from selling Russian oil abroad considerably, which will actually reduce the amount of convertible currency, hard currency, Russian government has, and will significantly impact social situation in Russia, where Russian government might likely even default on its inner debt to its citizens, like paying them salaries and pensions. And then, as well, Western Europe can actually respond to poisonings of Skripal and his daughter Yulia by establishing a short-term economic blockade of Russian gas, natural gas, and instead will build a new pipeline from Qatar, from Arabian Peninsula country, small country Qatar, which has oil deposits, large oil deposits, and we can actually import as well natural gas and oil from that Qatar and Saudi Arabia as well, and other Arabian countries, and block any imports of Russian natural gas and oil, which will actually again would reduce deposits of hard currency in the Russian treasury and will negatively impact social obligations of Russian government, will cause Russian government to suffer default of its inner debt, to its citizens will actually might bring down the presidency of the repressive and corrupt Russian President Putin, who lies a lot to public, the Russian public, which I remember even that brave Russian journalist Anatoly Kuzyshev mentioned that Russian President Putin was lying in his election promises, to establish welfare for children, and said a number of other lies. Actually lies in his pre-electoral promises as very unethical person, and as well his government committed to assassination, as President Putin once met a young Russian nationalist. I've seen on Russian Channel 1 TV. It's about 6 years ago, and that guy, young nationalist, asked him if he wants to kill Russian immigrants abroad. President Putin told him that they were simply foreign citizens, but he didn't say yes or no, didn't indicate otherwise, and simply said that those were foreign citizens. But then I don't know if he gonna side with Russian nationality. But if it comes to that, he even discusses the film of assassination of Russian immigrants abroad. He's actually part of the evil empire, and then that's why Russia should be careful to avoid any attempts to commit assassination of its opponents abroad, of its critics abroad. Like Avan survived an assassination attempt and caught a Russian spy, guy, red-handed, who actually told me that he was former Soviet army officer, and told me he would show me how to criticize his president. And then he ordered another Armenian mechanic in his late 50s to sabotage my vehicle, which was in repair in that shop, that Hollywood shop, auto shop. Imagine what would happen then. And then in a second, when after that, repair, of inside my apartment in Los Angeles, somebody poured combustible liquid inside the oven. So when I turned on the oven, it caught fire. So I had to extinguish it with large plates full of water. I luckily managed to do it, but then it's not a very nice, good idea, to pour combustible liquids into ovens, in order to cause fire. And I believe that one of the workers, did that, who was looking at me in very ugly way, making despondent and very desperate faces, at me, maybe he was actually hated immigrant, but for another reason, maybe he's not a spy, of course. So, that's the deal. I'm saying that some people capable of committing terrorist acts, sabotage, or out of hate, And hopefully my views are not like that, and they're smart enough, to profess progressive views. And actually, I really like that Time Will Show journalist, journalist Anatoly Kuzyshev, who blamed the Russian President Putin, repressive Russian President Putin, in making false promises and outright lies, lying to Russian public. He actually could lose his job for it, but then maybe he's still, of course, he's a Kremlin lackey who actually adopts and the side of the Kremlin and try to advocate, be a devil's advocate, to advocate anything that Kremlin does, and then, they also resort to false, fabricated evidence to doctor the evidence of their so-called experts who actually will only tell the story that been ordered by the Kremlin, confirm the story, and will actually they behave rather ugly, lie a lot, tell lots of crazy stories, and then disrespect their opponents, do hate mongering, with brown reds. These people simply profess philosophy of poverty, like with Kuginyan, with brown red Russian former Soviet derelict of the Soviet era, who just want to make Russia communist again by severing ties with West. But then, in case of further in Cold War, West Europeans can actually make an economic blockade and block stop any attempts to buy Russian natural gas or oil or diamonds or whatever Russians sell or try to export. In order to reduce its amount of hard currency available to the Russian government, that might actually take its effect eventually. Hopefully, more liberal changes will take place in Russia, and Russian censorships like Goskomnadzor or Government Committee of Oversight will actually start to exist.